Hey, greetings and salutations to everybody. It is a new day, and we have new mercies and new grace from God, new blessings. I want to share a thought that I was just reading something and I got a thought from it and I wanted to share with all of us, right? So, interestingly, sometimes we're going through some struggles, some stuff, and we cry out to God, right? Because we come to our what we call our wits end, and we believe that, boy, this is just the end of the road, and we cry out to God, right? And God have a very unique way of responding a lot of times. You know, most times He gives us a quick fix, but I think the majority of the time He operates in a very unique way. Sometimes instead of rescuing us from the peril that we are going through and we believe that, boy, this is just it, if God don't come through right now, we are doomed. There's no way out. And there seems to be a pattern with God that I notice, that He sometimes seems to make the situation worse before He makes it better, right? He seemed to bring us into deeper troubles and some tighter spot. God seemed to tighten the spot. And so when we thought that it could not get any worse, it got worse. And we believe that here it is that we are crying out to God for help. And instead of God coming through, God seemed to be moving further away. But I realized that it is a pattern that God uses. His way a lot of times is what seem like desertion is really intervention. Let me show you the thought that I want to share. When Israel was in Egypt in slavery, right? Bondage, and we know they were crying out and so on, and God engineered the circumstances so that Moses would get them out. But we know the things that God did and all of that, right? And it says every time that Moses went to Pharaoh increased the workload. But the point is this now. God said through Moses to Pharaoh, let my people go that they may worship, right? Which tells us something already, that whenever God rescue us from a situation, from our cries and our perils, we have a responsibility and a duty to worship Him. But this is where when I get to know, when God led them out, Moses was the leader. And I look in Exodus chapter 14, and it was God who told Moses where he was supposed to lead the children of Israel, right? Now, if you look in verse 1 and verse 9, three names were mentioned. And I always just read through this. And this morning I said, let me look at the meaning of these names. And I realized that there's a very powerful message there. Because one, the name Pi Ahiroth, there's Migdal, and there's Baal Zephon, right? Now, stay with me. The meaning of the first name, Pi Ahithroth, means a narrow pass, right? And you look at the picture, it means that there's no way out. Migdal means a fortress or enemy power. So instead of God leading Israel away from enemy power or enemy stronghold, He led them to it. He led them to a place where there was no way out. As I told you, the first name means that. But the third name, Baal Zephon, means false god, or a fortress for the spiritual gods. No. Look at it. Three things they are now encountering. They are encountering a blockage. There's no way out of the situation. It just got worse. It's a place where the enemy is at his strongest and there is obvious spiritual opposition. Now, why would God do that? Because God wants to ensure that when you come out of the situation, you can't say is by your own skill, your own strength, is because your father have money, is because your husband have influence, is because your wife is brilliant. He wants to strip us of all humanly effort and testimonies that we can eliminate him out of the situations. And so he brings us to some tighter spots. So you see, when he came through for Israel by parting the Red Sea, Israel would have known that they would have known about the gods of Egypt. So when God bring them to the point where he's defeating them, he's not only defeating Egyptians, he's defeating the mindset of the spiritual authority that Egypt seemed to have over Israel. He's defeating he's relieving them of the fact that when you get to your lowest, that is the point where God shows up strongest. He's saying, I'm taking you to the point where the enemy seems like he's at his utmost power. He's showing forth that strength that it seems like it's unmatched. But God says, if I can defeat the enemy at that point, you'll realize that there is a God whose power is unmatched. When God brings you out of a situation, bring us out of situations, and we didn't reach the rock bottom, we can have all type of things to say, yeah, it was God, but yeah, it was the bank manager who know my auntie and my uncle and him approve the law. But when God can make everything get rejected and then out of nowhere, he comes through and rescue you, you look at yourself and say, my God, this had to be God. Nobody else could have done this because I have exhausted all my options. And it brings me back to a story in the Bible about Lazarus. We talk all the time about, Jesus delayed and so on and so on. But have you ever realized that Jesus had the authority? We always talk about the fact that Jesus stayed 2 extra days, but have we ever thought about the fact that he never even had to go to Bethany? Because Mary and Martha and the disciples would have seen him done miraculous things by just speaking. And when the news got to him that Lazarus was sick, he could have spoken a word to heal Lazarus, but he delayed. He did not speak, and he delayed his coming. And Mary and Martha, when he finally came, it's like they're saying, you come too late. They said, if you had been here, in other words, if you had intervened at the time when we asked you to intervene, it would not have gotten to this point. Or even when we called you and we thought that you would have fixed it, it got worse. Sometimes we think we called on God and it's getting worse. No, it's not getting worse. In our eyes and in our understanding, it is seemingly getting worse. But if God has touched the situation, it is getting better. But he has a way of bringing us to, what's the name of the place? Pi Broth, Migdal, and Baal Zephon. He has a way of bringing us to the point that we know that the highest spiritual authority that is opposing us, that is fighting against us, the place where the enemy is at its strongest, and the place where it seems like this is just the dead end, that's where he shows up. That's where he wants to show up for us, because he knows that if he can show up there and diffuse all of the enemy's plans and strategy, at that point he knows that the reason he is bringing us out can be realized in our life. He said, let my people go that they may worship. So when he brings you from that point, you are forced to acknowledge that, yo, it's had to be God. Yo, I know that I couldn't have done this. So let's just bear the squeezing a little bit. When it seems like, I know it might be tightening up and it's like you feel like, suffocating. It moved from a slight strangle, the situation that was strangling you, it gets to the point now it feels like it's now suffocating you and your breath is about to be cut off. God is saying, that is the point that I want to introduce myself to the situation to make you see. Say it was not man, but it was God. It was not because you were wise, you were brilliant. It's not what you learned in school, college, university. It's not even what they taught you in church, because sometimes we are in church, but we're not in God. But God is saying, this is me showing up and showing off. In the book of Romans, Paul said it this way. Paul says, his ways are past finding out. So let's have a dependence on God, that once we call and we know he has answered, even when it seemed to be getting worse, that's God at work. Have a blessed day. God bless you. And I hope this word reach somebody's heart. Share it to somebody who you know might need this word. And have a God blessed day. One love.